is in.
Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown. Joining me today, my co-host, colleague, good friend, and also national scout for us on Cover One, Christian Page. How you doing, brother?
Doing well. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody listening.
Appreciate it, brother. Same to you and your family, and hopefully it's a good one. Any big plans for Thursday?
Not too much. Just staying in town. We got a lot of family coming in, so that beats having to face the traffic on the interstates and everything. So fortunate enough, I'm staying in town. What about you?
Pretty much the same. Going over to the in-laws' house for a few hours, and then probably over to my parents' house. But I mean, it's local drive, so nothing too crazy. Don't have to go across the state. So 15 minutes in the car for a bunch of turkey that I don't have to worry about cooking is
there you go.
It's a good time. And
what's your go-to Thanksgiving side dish or main dish?
Oh man, so obviously the turkey is always like the thing, but the side dish, it's got to either be the mashed potatoes or I like stuffing. I think it's if it's cooked right. But I mean, honestly, I'm a dessert guy, so like pumpkin pie is like the thing. Yeah. Like if I can get just my slice of pumpkin pie, 5 minutes to myself with the pie, it's all good. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. No, okay, so there's this dish, and I don't know how popular it is outside my family. I'm sure it is, but it's called a sweet potato souffle. And It's obviously like mashed sweet potatoes. And then you have marshmallows, pecans, and like brown sugar on top. And then you put it in the oven and you just like let that like crust over as a layer. Like it's pretty much, we're talking desserts. So, I mean, that's pretty much what we're talking about with this. But it's like, it's perfect. And see, I used to not be the biggest sweet potato guy. But when I got introduced to this is by far my go-to on Thanksgiving. So I don't make it. I just let the ladies figure that one out. But I definitely eat it and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I'm actually I've grown to like sweet potatoes a lot more. My wife's probably a big help into that because, she's a health freak type of person, and she's all like, "Oh, these are great for you, this and that." And it's like, "Oh, okay, whatever," So, no, that sounds amazing. Is that like I've never heard it here in Michigan. Is that like a Southern thing, or is that like I
don't know. I didn't know too much about it until maybe a few years ago. But, yeah, I wonder how much our Thanksgivings, like, differ based on, like, how meals are prepped because,
in, like, region, yeah.
Yeah, we like to fatten everything up. Like, green beans, they're not healthy here. We can say they're greens and that they're healthy and good for you. But when it boils down to it, no, somebody's putting sugar in them or something fried in them. But no, yeah, I don't know how much they differ. But yeah, sweet potato souffle was introduced to me a few years ago, but I don't know how prevalent it is in the South. But I guess in the North, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I mean, we eat them. I'm not going to say we don't eat them for sure, but
oh yeah, I just meant the design of the dish.
Yeah, no, you're good. I got you. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited though. It's Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday, no doubt. Get to drink, get to eat, and get to watch football. So it's like a perfect mix. So it's exciting. So Thursday, big games on tap for the Lions. They've got the Bears. The Bears should run through them. Dallas plays Washington. And then the night game, I believe, is New Orleans and Atlanta. So that's like a new thing now. The last few years, we've been seeing night games for Thursday. So Atlanta and New Orleans should be good. It's going to be interesting, though. Colt McCoy is starting for the Washington Redskins. I can't believe Colt McCoy is still in the league.
No, I can't either. But it seems like in spot starter duties, he's been pretty solid. And, I mean, he's been kind of – I guess he's kind of a journeyman backup quarterback. But, in some spot starts, he's actually been pretty good. He came in, last week threw a touchdown pass. So, I'm interested. I mean, Colt McCoy was used to playing Thanksgiving against Texas A&M when he was at Texas, so now he's going to get to start in the NFL on Thanksgiving, so that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a good game for sure. I'm looking forward to it, as I think we all are. But another thing you guys should be looking forward to this week, obviously you do your daily fantasy sports all the time, from the NBA to the NHL to the NFL, whatever it is that you do. But you need to think of a different way to do it because it gets kind of repetitive, does it not? I mean, you spend, you got your $50,000 pretend maximum budget that you can spend, and you spend all of it. You put together these lineups with flex players and everything else, and then you spend tens of hundreds of dollars, whatever it is that you spend, and you lose it all. Or maybe you win big if you're good at it, but sometimes you're not good at it. So if you're tired of doing it the same old way and you can't find success with it, maybe you got to change the way you're doing it or change what you're using. And the best way to do that is with Thrive Fantasy. This is a brand new way to do daily fantasy sports. It's a sport prop bet type of daily fantasy sports that you can basically bet the over, the under on a specific player's matchup, from how many passing yards they have, passing touchdowns. They also do it in the NBA, and you can set your lineups that way. It's a very fun and interesting way to set it up. And if you're a bit more of a numbers person and you like going with the overs and the unders and everything else, then this is a thing for you. So you need to check it out today at Thrive Fantasy. The best way to sign up is bit.ly/Russ NFL Draft. It's the best way to do your daily fantasy sports needs. If you sign up today, you deposit $10, they will match you $10 for that. So check it out with Thrive Fantasy. So moving forward, we've got actually 2 shows that we're going to do this week. We're planning for Friday. I think it's going to be a good show where we kind of preview the games for Friday and Saturday, because we've got a ton of football for Friday and a ton of football for Saturday. But what I want to do today is, and you're in agreement as well, we want to talk about the NFLPA Bowl, or the Collegiate Bowl, and the Senior Bowl, and some of the accepted invites that we've seen so far. And the Collegiate Bowl's had a lot more accepted invites. Now, the Senior Bowl, I believe, has sent out their initial 60. I don't know if all 60 have been accepted. I've seen some of the tweets from Jim Nagy. But the Collegiate Bowl, there's actually some players in this game. And it's, you've got Bryce Love's the headliner. He's accepted his invite. Clayton Thorson's in there. Andrew Beck, the tight end from Texas, is in there. Adderly, Nasir, University of Delaware defensive back, he's in there. I saw you actually tweet about him a little bit. Do we want to start with him? A small school guy. It seems like you know a little bit about him and some of the things that he brings to the table.
Sure. Yeah. And I was definitely excited when seeing him, because I guess he's going to double dip and do the Senior Bowl and the Collegiate Bowl. And he's just one of those small school guys that, you're going to have to keep an eye on, because he's going to take, a lot of headlines away in these games. And you're going to see him shoot up draft boards, but he's just a natural defensive back. And I say defensive back because he's played a little bit of corner, kind of plays that rover position for Delaware, but he can get after football. He has great awareness and great instincts. And I think that's one of those things, and I've said it on this podcast before, that it's kind of hard to know, I guess, like football intelligence when you're looking at somebody, or the overall instincts. I know it can be hard just looking at it from a certain angle without really talking about somebody. But for those guys that have it, it's definitely evident. And he's one of those guys that definitely has it, because you can just tell how he reads the quarterback and quickly reacts. Like, he has that athleticism, those loose hips to turn and locate the football. He can time it well. He has 10 interceptions in his career. And I just think his technique as a cover guy, whether it's zone or in man, and his overall awareness, this is why this guy, don't be surprised if he's going to be a top 60, top 70 pick before it's all said and done, because I think with these all-star games he's going up against the best of the best, especially at the Senior Bowl. And when that Senior Bowl staff is already shooting talent he's put together now, NFL guys are going to get one-on-one time with him. I think he's going to impress in a multitude of ways. I think Nasir Adderly is really going to be a riser in this draft class, because the cornerback class, it's not bad, but I think there's a lot of fluidity there after you get maybe past 5 or 6 guys. I think he could definitely rise up some draft boards after all these all-star games are said and done.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. I've never actually seen him play, so I don't know much about him, but I'm glad you corrected the way his name is supposed to be said, because I did last name first and then his first name.
With these names, I never know. And with the FCS, like the lack of coverage they get, because I've gotten my hands on maybe 3 or 4 games from him, and I think his name's been mispronounced in a couple, or pronounced differently in a couple games. So whatever. We'll go with the Delaware defensive back. How about that?
No, you hit the nail on the head with it as far as like his name. I just did last name first, like I was doing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I was doing last name like I was doing attendance for grade school or something, because I'm looking at, and you guys can do the same at home on Twitter at NFLPA Bowl. They've got all the accepted invites with a pretty cool graphic and the date and the location for everything. It's going to be January 19th of 2019 at the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena. And it shows, where they're from as far as the school, the position, and their name. Well, some of the players, it's got their last name first and then their first name. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, that's not his name. That's not correct. But yeah, so he's an interesting name. I've seen some buzz on Twitter about him. Dane Brugler's talked about him a little bit. You seem to be very high on him as well. A guy that I like that I'm very impressed to see on here is Steven Sims, the wide receiver from Kansas. He's a slot receiver, no doubt about it, the next level. I don't want to say he's Tyreek Hill, but he's a smaller, compact receiver, smaller frame, but he's shifty, and he actually does a really good job getting vertical up the field. And I like the way he works along the sidelines. I think he can be a yards after the catch kind of guy, maybe like a Golden Tate to an extent. So it wouldn't surprise me if this guy was a future New England Patriot, if he was a potential Kansas City Chief, maybe a Los Angeles Rams, or even the New Orleans Saints. They need some wide receiver help. Just teams that really like to spread the football around and they like to use pass-heavy offenses, if you will. Steven Sims, I think, would be a great fit. He fits a spread system. I think he's a slot receiver. And with the Detroit Lions having quite the need at wide receiver now that Golden Tate's gone, for a guy that fits this mold, I think he would also be a good fit there with Matthew Stafford. So maybe that will happen. I don't think he's a top 60 player or a top 75 player, but I think he's a guy that we could talk about probably on day 3 of the draft. Maybe he's an undrafted free agent, but when you get into that 5th round, 6th round, I think he's got some interesting traits that we could talk about on day 3 of the draft down the line. And maybe he does put himself in the 3rd round discussion or something. But, you seen ESB last year go to the Packers real late in the draft. Jamon Moore went real late to the Packers in the draft. So if those guys that I think are just more physically gifted are going that late in the draft, I think Steven Sims, if he doesn't test well athletically, probably isn't going to put himself in day 2 of the draft. So Steven Sims, though, is a guy, though, that you need to pay attention to for this specific draft bowl, if you will. How do they market this? The Senior Bowl and the Collegiate Bowl? How do we classify it? Just like off season or just extra bowl game? Like, how do we classify it in the draft terms?
I've always called them like college football all-star games. That's
that'll
how
work.
I've always phrased it.
That works.
Because you can kind of just lump all of them together. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of is like a postseason bowl games, I guess. That's how you want to phrase it. But yeah, I just go with college football all-star games.
Yeah, all-star games better. I'm thinking of like a more like in-depth, like detail, like term or something. Like I'm going to, dictionary.com trying to find the biggest word I can find. But another name, Jeffrey Smith, Boston College wide receiver. He's a very – I don't know how to like classify him, but he's got some skill set vertically, and I think he's more of a possession guy moving forward when he gets to the NFL. But he's got some big play threat to him because he can get vertical down the field. He'll spread the field a little bit, and I think he's just one of those guys that has slipped under the radar. He really popped at the beginning of the year and has fallen off a little bit, but he's been consistent enough, and he's one of those guys. Again, I said Bryce Love is going to be there. That's probably the biggest name. Clayton Thorson with this quarterback class, if he has a great all-star game, then he would be one of those guys I think that could put himself in the position to get drafted and maybe move up some positional rankings for the quarterback position. Is there anybody else that you've noticed for this bowl game that you really like? I've got one more, but I can turn it to you, and then I'll finish it off.
Yeah, a name that just catches my attention. I have not laid eyes on him this year, but Calvin Anderson, the left tackle for Texas, just following his story last year, is a grad transfer from Rice, and he was a 2-time All-Conference USA guy there. So I'm interested to see, how he's progressed at Texas at that, upper level of play in the Big 12. And it sounds like he's done pretty well. So I believe he started every game for Texas. And we know Texas had their ups and downs, but I think for the most part, their pass protection's probably been fine because you hear big stat lines from their quarterbacks, no matter who's playing, whether it's Shane Buechele or Sam Ehlinger. So I'm interested just to see the look back, get a little report on him, and then look at this game and see how he matches up. But when you see a guy in this game with a Texas Longhorn on his helmet, you expect them to dominate. And no disrespect to the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl, but they do kind of grab from the lower divisions, and they're more not just necessarily an all-star game, but there's more that goes into the whole process in the event. But when you got a Texas logo on your helmet, you are supposed to dominate. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Calvin Anderson has to offer that week.
Yeah, he's got such an interesting story, and a guy that comes in, transfers over, fills in for Connor Williams this past year, and
big shoes to fill.
Yeah, big shoes to fill, and I mean I think he's done a decent job with it. And Texas at one point was one of the top 10 teams in the country, and he was a big part of it offensively. He's been a big help to, I think, Sam Ehlinger as far as protecting him and really getting that run game going. So it's nice to see him get some recognition. And honestly, would we have seen him from this with Rice? Maybe, maybe not. But I think he really stands out with Texas because when you get to those bigger D1 programs, you have that target on your back. You're under the microscope. So lastly, the guy that I saw, and I saw him get invited and accept it just before we did the show today, is Kaiir Willis, Michigan State's defensive leader and safety, who to me, and I don't like you. I hate when I hear like people say to me. I don't mean like if you say that a lot, I'm not like judging you or anything or anybody in particular. I just when I hear like to me, and I just did it, and it really bothers me that I just did that. But Kaiir Willis is a guy that reminds me of Glover Quinn a little bit, and for the Detroit Lions, and he's just one of those players that at 6 foot 215, a natural leader back there at safety. He's got decent ball skills, but he's just got the ability to be around the football all the time, and that's coming up, cleaning tackles over the top, or just flying up into the alley and cleaning up areas all over the field. And I think he's one of those guys that will probably be a late 4th round guy or a day 3 guy. Maybe he goes undrafted. I don't know. Obviously, it depends on how he really measures out and how he tests athletically. I know, we like to, stick to the tape, but we know that scouts in the NFL, they love the numbers. They love a guy athletically, and they believe in that stuff. And Kaiir Willis, I think, is somewhat limited athletically, but he does a really good job, just a good technique, good football player, kind of like how you feel about Nasir Adderly as far as solid technique. I feel the same way about Kaiir Willis. So it's nice to see him on there. It's nice to see a Spartan get some recognition. I'm glad he's accepted the invite, and I'm hoping it goes well for him. But moving to another all-star game, the bowl game that we'll be at, the Senior Bowl for 2019, we've got some acceptance players. Jalen Moore was the first one, running back for App State. Terrell Hanks, linebacker for New Mexico State. My boy, Charles Menaha for Texas, interior defensive lineman. John Kaminsky, the edge for UCWV, and then Isaiah Johnson, corner for Houston. Josh Allen, the better Josh Allen, the edge rusher for Kentucky. Foster Moreau, tight end for LSU, and then Nasir Adderly for Delaware. So anybody that really stands out to you for these guys?
I mean, where I'm leaning here, looking at Josh Allen from Kentucky. I mean, the guy has done absolutely everything you can to bolster your draft stock in one season. And last year, I guess we talked about it in weeks past, but last year we saw the potential. We saw, just some glimpses of what he could be. And now he has a plan. Now he's put everything together. He can consistently rush the passer. He's shown more ability to take on some power rushes to just not necessarily get to the quarterback, but kind of shrink the pocket, which, if you really dissect some of these pass rushers, they don't necessarily have to get a hand on the quarterback to be, recorded as a successful play. If they can somehow shrink the pocket, make the quarterback feel uneasy, that's a win. In my book, that's a win in mostly everybody's book. Josh Allen's found a way to consistently do that if he can't get off, can't get disengaged from his matchup. But overall, the guy has the flexibility, has the quickness. Not the greatest get off, but he finds ways to get around that, despite maybe a lack of overall elite burst that you would see from most of these guys in the first round. But the guy is showing a lot of technique, in rushing the passer. You got to love what he will bring to the table in these one-on-one drills, but it'll also be interesting to see, just based on more of a slight frame, even though long, but a slight frame, to see how he tests in the linebacker drills when we get to Mobile. So he's one of the more intriguing prospects based on his projection, maybe in the second half of the first round, but also his projection based on his position. Is he going to be a guy that consistently plays on the end, or are you going to see him drop in the coverage? But I think we'll see some of those questions get answered in Mobile. So I'm definitely excited to see Josh Allen at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Josh Allen has definitely put everything together this year as a prospect. I think he's really turned the corner just, as an edge rusher, as a guy that can drop into coverage, really good length. Like you said, though, doesn't have that elite burst, but it's still good enough, and he finds a way to win, and it wins with technique. And I'm a firm believer that if a player doesn't have good technique, and normally you and myself, we can tell when a guy doesn't have that technique really from the rip. You can tell right away with how he's doing with his technique from the very beginning of the film. And Josh Allen is one of those guys that he has, relatively good and consistent technique. Some other names, though, that have been invited, I don't know if they've accepted it. Chase Winovich, my guy, edge for Michigan. Clayton Thorson, Trace McSorley, the quarterbacks for the Big Ten. Dalton Reisner, offensive tackle for Kansas State. Gerald Willis, interior defensive lineman for Miami. O'Shane Zimenez,
yep,
for Old Dominion, the edge rusher. Carl Granderson, edge for Wyoming. So got some edge rushers in there, got some quarterbacks in there. Andy Isabella, wide receiver for UMass, had a big day against Georgia, and he's actually the best receiver in the country right now. He's starting to get some buzz, but I don't know exactly how he'll match up with more physical corners and things like that. But, he did well against Georgia, so he's got to be okay. But, yeah, these are some good guys. I'm curious, Dalton Reisner, I really want to watch him play. I really hope he accepts it. I hope he's there. I really want to watch him play because when I watched him on tape, I just didn't see it. I'm not trying to knock the guy, but I just maybe it was too late in the evening or something, but I was falling asleep. There was times that I was like, man, he's not finishing guys the way I thought like he was going to. I thought he was going to be putting guys into the dirt and doing those things, but he's got versatility. It's there. I just don't think he should be getting some of the buzz. I've seen some first round discussion of him, a guy that, Reisner's this guy that's going to rise up draft boards, this and that. And he could, but I just don't see it. So out of some of those names, is there anybody that really stands out?
I'm with you on Reisner. And I think, this is his first year on the outside, or maybe second year. I know he's going to be probably inside at center, one of the guard positions when you get to the next level. So maybe that's why, but you're right with the finishing stuff. And I know this gets talked about on social media pretty often. It seems like every year. Finishing isn't just something extra for offensive linemen. It's almost a necessity because you're seeing the type of athletes in these defensive linemen and second-level players where even if you think you have them engaged throughout the play, they're going to find ways to disengage. So if there is a way you can consistently finish, that is a key factor really in the evaluation process, because that can make a difference between certain projections. And I know that gets tossed around. Some people say, well, finishing is just kind of an overrated quality. I think it's an underrated quality because not everybody necessarily uses that, and it's definitely a necessity to really accentuate all your skills and to finish out a play. That's what it is. And so that's definitely something. If you're not seeing that in Reisner or any prospect, you can't convince me he's a first-round player. But we're talking about offensive tackles, I guess, kind of, depending on where Reisner is. But Max Scharping out of Northern Illinois, a guy that he's not going to blow you away with, oohs and ahs with athleticism, but he's just simply that consistent left tackle product. And if you want to stick him on the right side, that's fine. He has a huge frame, and you think you're going to look at a guy that has a great kick slide. He doesn't have the quickest feet, but he takes up enough space with his kick slide, and he has a consistent punch, and he does not get moved off his base. He has a strong anchor, and I know people are going to argue, well, the level of competition. When he played Florida State, he kept Brian Burns in check, whether with Brian Burns' quickness, his length, or whoever he faced on that Florida State defensive line. He kept him in check and gave the quarterback an opportunity to succeed. Max Scharping, I'm interested to seeing if he accepts his invite, if he will be a guy that can really dominate in those one-on-one drills. That's my favorite part about the Senior Bowl. But if he can dominate those matchups, then I think we're going to start seeing him in the top 50, top 60 conversation. He's that good and that consistent. Of course, consistency is one of the biggest things you can find, not only in offensive linemen, but really any player in the draft.
Yeah. I haven't watched him in particular, but I've heard some great things about him. You hit the nail on the head with him. I'm looking forward to watching it with him. One guy from Northern Illinois, I've talked about him before, edge rusher, Sutton Smith. That guy is just an unbelievable motor. Hopefully he declares and everything else, and he's, got some good stuff coming from him in the future. I'm hoping he's a draftable kid down the line for Northern Illinois. But since we're on that topic of offensive tackles, and I want to close it out with that, West Virginia left tackle, get ready for the butchering of the name, unless you want to say it, because you did a fantastic job in the pre-show talking about him. It's Yodny, how do I say it? Cajuste. So Yodny Cajuste, left tackle number 55 for West Virginia, is a player that you need to know for this draft when you're talking offensive tackles. I put out a piece on Jonah Williams being a technician this past week, talking about the Alabama left tackle, how he is the best in the class. We've talked about Greg Little for Ole Miss and how we kind of want to see more. I think we both can agree that we don't think he's exactly where he needs to be. But Yodny Cajuste is a guy that is just Eric Turner brought me onto him. He was telling me about him. But this was a guy that was just winning at the point of attack. Maybe not as flexible as you want him to be, but, he's kick slides pretty good. He does a really good job with length. I think he's pretty mobile for a player his size. He's like 6'6", 310, 308, something like that, in that range. This is a guy, though, that just really stood out. Strong upper body, strong lower body. And, I think, obviously, again, the flexibility is a bit of a concern as far as, he just doesn't look like a natural knee bender, but he's just one of those guys that good hands and his grip strength is there. And once he gets a hold, best of luck, because you're not winning that battle. So, if you're a speed guy, you got a shot. But if you're going power for power, probably not going to happen. Like Bradley Chubb going speed to power, translating speed to power with him, best of luck, dude. I mean, Bradley Chubb's very talented, probably a more superior athlete and everything else, but Yodny Cajuste is a guy that just, wow, he really stood out, and I'm really looking forward to more of his tape this offseason and getting to talk about him more as we move along.
Yeah, there's not much I can really add. Like you said, if you just want to, play with him in a phone booth, you are not winning that battle. He'll throw you out of the phone booth. But like you said, he's not a natural bender, which could come to concern depending on, if you're looking at him as a right tackle, left tackle, or however a team wants to evaluate him. But plays a little high. His feet can be a little choppy at times. You alluded to his kick slide. But overall, just his powerful upper body. And you want to see him be more of a knee bender because we know how powerful his lower body is. And I think that's one of the more frustrating things, I guess you could say, about his tape. But overall, the guy has the length. He has shown some athleticism to be effective at the second level, and his power is the reason why we're really talking about him as high as we are. But yeah, it's definitely a guy that, depending on who you talk to, I don't know how the offensive tackle class is really perceived right now. I think it's okay. It's nothing special. We're probably only going to see 1, 2, possibly 3 in the first round. Jonah Williams for sure, but I think we're going to have to try to force somebody else in there. But with all these defensive linemen, I think there'll be a lot of offensive linemen forced out of there. But at the end of the day, I think Cajuste is a guy that's definitely going to, shoot up some radars. And I think he is right now. And obviously having a lot of eyes on Will Grier, that definitely helps your tackle and the protection there. So if Will Grier has a clean pocket, it's mostly due to this guy.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, he could very well end up being 2 or 3 on the board as far as positional rankings for the offensive tackle group. So I'm excited to see where he ultimately falls on my board. Again, just his tape is very good. So if you have a chance to watch him, check him out. I don't know exactly who West Virginia's got this week. Is it Oklahoma?
I believe it's Oklahoma on Friday.
Okay. Well, we will preview that game Friday morning-ish or something like that. But I think that's all I got. I don't see anything else. I've got some names on the list, but we've already talked about them. So I'm good. I don't know if you got anything else to add as far as players that you've seen or watched over the last few days.
Not much, but I'll say I'm tooting my own horn here. But I was for my day job. We were over at Gus Malzahn, Auburn's head coach's press conference. Of course, Auburn's playing Alabama this Saturday, and Quinnen Williams came up about 5 times among him and 4 players that were at the press conference. So I was like, this guy is the real deal. I mean, of course, Gus is saying, well, 92, we got a game plan around him. But having a team like Auburn having to specifically and explicitly say they got a game plan pretty much around one guy, that tells you how dominant Quinnen Williams has been this year. So go back, if nobody really knows what I'm talking about, go back to last week's episode. He was my can't miss prospect. So unfortunately, being an Auburn grad, that kind of hurts me to hear that. But as an NFL draft analyst, which is first and foremost, I have to appreciate Quinnen Williams, because with Auburn's shaky offensive line play, Quinnen Williams may be in the backfield quite often. So we'll see how Jarrett Stidham will deal with the pocket presence and the pressure.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. But, of course, and just to close it out on this last week's show, we talked about can't miss guys. You talked about Williams. I talked about Ed Oliver. And Williams has a great game. And Ed Oliver's in an argument with Major Applewhite about winning a jacket.
What was your take on that?
Well, to me, I don't care. Personally, I don't care. I as long as it's not happening at the Senior Bowl or at an All-Star game type thing or at the Combine, like Reuben Foster was, cussing and yelling at scouts and doctors and medical people at the scouting combine, the place where your biggest job interview of your life is happening. And you're telling, people, do you know who I am, this and that. So he dropped quite a bit on my board, and I was really surprised that he went in the first round when he did. But clearly this isn't the same thing, and this is just a different thing, and I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. And the thing is Ed Oliver, Major Applewhite, and the players and the coaches around know what was said, know what was happening. We'll never know. We'll never know the truth. It's dead at the door. We'll never know what's going to happen with that, but it's a bad look on him because the media is going to make it look like a bad look, and that's what's always going to happen. But personally, I don't care because Ed Oliver is a terrific player, and he's one of those guys that's got a high motor. And I saw a tweet from Daniel Jeremiah today talking about run-stuffing defensive tackles and how their value gets lost in a game like last night with Kansas City and the Rams. And he's right. But Ed Oliver is more than just a run-stuffing defensive lineman. Yeah, he has a ton of tackles for loss, but he's also a threat to rush the passer every single time. He is an Aaron Donald-like player as far as traits and style of play. Now, is he Aaron Donald? No, I don't believe so. I don't think there's anybody on the planet like Aaron Donald. Quinnen Williams, to me, resembles somewhat of an Ndamukong Suh. Ed Oliver reminds me somewhat of an Aaron Donald. Odds are those guys are teammates. That's what's the rarity of that. But I just think that when you talk about styles and way that they play, I think it's very similar. So it sucks seeing it. Ed Oliver's probably not going to be the first pick of the draft unless he just absolutely obliterates the draft process and is just a fantastic player. He is, but fantastic human and doesn't have any concerns and anything like that, which I don't know him personally, but from things that I've read and seen, he seems okay in interviews, but this was a big flaw and it's a big red flag and people are going to make it out bigger than it needs to be, but they don't need to. I personally don't think so. So it's not going to hurt his draft position on my board at all unless the knee comes back really bad and he's, they're saying, he's only got 5 years to play because his knees, got severe ligament damage and things like that, like a Mo Hurst type of situation or something, it's unfortunate for the player, but it's, part of the draft process that happens. And every year that's something that happens. There's always something with the player that hurts them. And it could be Ed Oliver that it hurts. It takes him away from, first or second best on the board to 6th or 8th on the board or something like that for some people. So it could happen. Obviously it depends on what the other players do, what the other edge rushers do, defensive tackles, and really the quarterbacks. What do they do? So we'll see how that goes. But I've got nothing else to add. You've got nothing else to add. Friday, we're going to do a probably a prospect preview, game preview type thing for the last week of college football, unfortunately. The regular season, that is. But Christian, as always, brother, thank you for joining me. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family and everybody else out there. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you as well. Appreciate the support. Christian, where can we find you on Twitter, my man?
@_Christian Page. And once again, happy Thanksgiving to everybody too.
All right. Awesome. And for me, @Russ NFL Draft. And enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you guys on Friday.